right. So we finished talking about philosophical, moral philosophy. We need to talk about marketing theory. So when we talk about theories, there are like the theory that we've been talking about up until this point are what I would call grand theories, theories that explain, how it is we know what we know, what it is that constitutes the good life, or the question of conduct, and the question of governance. Those are macro level theories. We also have lower level theories that explain the way various things work, not the entire universe, but rather the way a certain system works within that universe, but not the whole thing. And so that's marketing theory. These are sort of the lower level theories that explain the way marketing works at either even a global level, but certainly not in an attempt to explain all kinds of great questions, but rather questions specific to the domain of marketing. So marketing as a activity has ancient roots. We don't know when the first societies formed, but we do know that once they did, once we started coming together in groups, we started having marketing activities. People started to specialize in doing things. That's one of the things about human beings that makes us different in many respects from other animals in the biological world, is that, are we the strongest animal on the planet? No. I mean, it depends on how you define strong. I think pound for pound, the strongest animal is something like actually I think it's like a honey badger. How many of you remember the honey badger video that went viral on YouTube? Anybody? I think it actually is some kind of weasel or honey badger that is pound for pound the strongest animal. Ants are enormously strong. They can carry, many times their body weight. So we're not the strongest animal. Do we have the best eyesight? No. Most of us are myopic, right? And wear glasses. And when I take them off, you all become blobs of masses that are fuzzy. Are we the fastest? No. That goes to the cheetah. What has allowed us? We're a fairly fragile creature, actually. What's allowed us to survive in a hostile world? Well, it's the ability to organize ourselves and become specialized in certain things and build societies. And so as an activity, marketing, when we start coming out of what we might think of as the primitive psyche, there was a time before man thought of himself in historical terms. And we know that time did exist, but once we come out of that, the anthropological and archaeological record reveals that we start to organize, we become marketers. And so for most of human history, as an academic discipline, though, marketing is relatively new. It has its origins in terms of the study at a collegiate level. It has its origins at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. That's when we see the first sort of departments of marketing emerge, and it emerges from two disciplines that I will make merciless fun of. One is economics, and specifically agricultural economics, and the other is psychology. And psychology, I always say, is the closest thing to witchcraft we teach on a college campus. Lay down on the couch and tell me how you feel about things. Look at these ink blots, and I can ascertain whether or not you're a serial killer, whatever. It's a lot of hokum. And economics is just, renaming stuff that we all understand intuitively with fancy terms. Again, I should probably not say this since the current dean is an economist. But it's true. I mean, they just sort of rename stuff that we all, maximization of utility. We all know what that means. It means you want to get the most bang for your buck. So marketing emerges out of these two disciplines, economics, and it really starts at not the great schools that you think about. It starts in agricultural schools as an attempt to try and solve problems of getting goods to market in the most efficient way. And so it starts at places like the University of Wisconsin. What they have a lot of in Wisconsin, where they produce cheese, right? Which is a perishable good, right? It goes bad. So it's how do we get things to market in the most efficient way? And that's the part of marketing nobody ever thinks of as being marketing, as sort of the logistics side of it. But that's where some of the origins of marketing really started. So when we start studying this as an academic pursuit, not just as a human activity, we start to identify various patterns, right? So for most of human history, what we could call marketing theory was what we call the production philosophy. So from the beginning of recorded history until about the 1920s, you see what's called the production theory of marketing. And this can be summed up by a movie, a rather old movie now, but it's one that, surprisingly enough, most of my students have seen at some point in time, called The Field of Dreams. How many of you have seen this movie with Kevin Costner? What is the one takeaway from The Field of Dreams? What's the punchline in Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come. That's it. That's the one thing, the one line. There's usually one line in every movie that people remember. It's sort of a great line. That's it. And that was the production philosophy for most of human history. If you had something, as we begin to specialize, I herd goats or whatever, and you have chickens, and you need meat. Goats are great for the production of meat and also milk. And I need eggs. We'll trade, we'll barter, and you'll accept that, right? And for most of human history, we didn't have a lot of options. There wasn't a great variety of stuff out there. And so people would settle for maybe less than ideal. This is exemplified by Henry Ford's Model T car, right? He's the first one, not the first person to manufacture a car. Lots of people manufactured cars before Henry Ford, but he was the first one to bring it to a mass market, to make it more than just a novelty. Prior to Henry Ford, automobiles were custom produced, they were enormously expensive, and they were really just products for the very wealthy. And they weren't all that useful because we didn't have things like we have today, like an interstate highway system where you could go vast distances. So, automobiles were not all that useful. The horse was actually more useful because, when you don't have a trail or you don't have a road to go down, the horse, can get you there. But Ford recognizes that this is going to be the way people get around. And that you're going to have these manufactured for everyday people. And aren't they a hell of a lot better than the horse? And what's wrong with horses? So I just recently lost my last horse, and I'm really contemplating whether or not I'm going to buy another horse because I've got lots of hobbies and I don't spend as much time riding as I used to. But I've raised and shown horses all of my life for the vast majority of my life. I've shown other people's horses, I've shown my horses. And it was great fun. And it was something that brought me a lot of joy for a lot of years. But, I've broken a hip. It's harder to get up on a horse after you've broken a hip. Why do I tell you this story? Well, because, you know, people back in the late 19th and early 20th century who were riding horses, this is a problem. That's your mode of transportation, and you break a hip like I have it, it becomes painful. I guess what you can do is rather than ride the horse, you can do what? You can hitch it to a wagon and teach it to drive. But that's still not exactly, anybody ever ridden in an actual buckboard wagon? We had one on my father's ranch. He bought one as sort of novelty and taught two of our horses to drive. It's not a real comfortable ride. You know, the suspension is just not great. What else is wrong with horses as a mode of transportation? Why is it that we have 77 counties in Oklahoma? That's a whole lot of counties for a state that's not actually all that big.
The wind, the horses half-day ride?
Yeah, it was, in order to be able to get to the county seat to conduct business, they wanted it to be within half a day so that you could get to the county seat, conduct your business, and get home within a day's ride of on horseback. That's why we have like little tiny counties. If you go to other states, they have New Mexico, which is almost twice the land size of Oklahoma, has something like 35 counties. They're huge. The counties are big. They're not these little tiny things. Apparently, the New Mexicans were not worried about whether or not you could get to the county seat to conduct business within a day's ride. But they're slow, right? Comparatively. What else is wrong with horses?
They just have a mind of their own.
They have a mind of their own.
They just go off track.
Yep. Yeah, they are a living creature and they have a mind of their own. When I was a kid, my parents, both my stepfather and my father at exactly the same time, each bought me a Shetland pony. People make this mistake with children. They see Shetland ponies and think, oh, they're cute, they're little, you know, I'll buy it for my kids to ride. They're horrible creatures. They're mean and ornery, and both of these horses did exactly the same thing. They were fine as long as we were going out on the trail, but they knew psychically when we were turning around to go back, and they would take off towards the barn at full speed with me, you know, under the horse, behind the horse, off the horse. And it, you know, and they have this mind of their own. They're going to do what they want to do. They can die. That's another problem with them. You know, they fall over dead. So, you know, Ford recognizes that this is a problem. He comes up with something better. He builds a better mousetrap. And you could have a Model T in any color you wanted so long as that color was black. Well, that was better than the horse, and so you put up with it. Black is a horrible color. And I always ask students in here in my classes, how many of you want a black car? And inevitably there's one poor lost soul who doesn't understand why you should ever want a black car. Black cars are horrible for a number of reasons. The first reason is that in Oklahoma, it's hot in the summer. It's enormously hot in the summer. And black absorbs all of the heat, and you can sort of feel it radiating off the car as you get into it. And the second is that we have this lovely red clay soil. And the wind comes, as the song goes, as the song Oklahoma comes sweeping down the plain, and you can wash your lovely black car, and in 3 minutes, there will be this gust of wind that will pick up that lovely red clay, and it will deposit it in a fine film all over your black car, and you can see it. You can just see it from miles away on that black background. It's great. Or worse yet, you have, you know, muddy roads and it ends up all over your lovely black car. But you could have a Model T in any color. Well, why would we accept that today? I mean, what's a better color for a car? White. White's a great color for cars in Oklahoma because it reflects the heat and it doesn't show the red mud as much. So why would we accept that? Well, that was all there was. There wasn't a whole lot. But then something happens. Other people start to enter the market. The Dodge brothers come along and they introduce other cars and things like that. And today nobody would accept a car where you had the only options were basically, very limited, whether they actually sort of did make one version of the Model T, I think, that had a like a truck bed, but instead of a back seat. But that was it. There wasn't a whole lot of choice. We wouldn't accept that today. Nobody wants to just drive the Model T. We need variety in the things that we drive. And so it's gonna, we have a lot of different models of cars. This leads to a sales philosophy being developed after the production. Now, it's not that this philosophy goes necessarily totally away. When we talk about these eras, there are companies that still use a production philosophy. Even high-tech companies use a production philosophy. Microsoft is a famous company that uses a production philosophy. They release really crappy operating systems that we all use, and they fix it on the back end. They'll release a horrible OS, and then they'll just sort of fix it on the back end. And why is it that we put up with that? Well, there are not a lot of options in that arena to this day. Now, there are beginning to be more options, but I noticed on the back where you have a MacBook back there, and that's an option. That's an alternative to Microsoft. But why is it that most people in here, a lot of you don't have your laptops with you, why is it that most people don't have the Apple option? Yeah, you can buy a Windows box, a Windows tablet for what?
300.
Yeah, $300, right? And that's what, 1,500, 2,000. I mean, depending on, it's expensive. So there's not a real option. Now there are starting to be, because of these devices, there are starting to be more OSs out there. But Microsoft is an example of a company that still uses the production philosophy. When Microsoft came out, when Bill Gates started the company, he didn't actually develop his own software. He bought an operating system to sell to the government from another company. He paid just almost nothing for it. It was called DOS, which was initially, I think it was actually called QDOS to begin with, which stood for Quick and Dirty Operating System. And then it became DOS, which was Digital Operating System. And he just sort of improved upon it, but it was a crappy system. There was a better system out there at the time. Why didn't it catch on? What was that system? It was called Linux. And why didn't Linux catch on? Well, nobody really knew who owned Linux. It was open source. And he comes along and he basically corners the market on the OS system. And so Microsoft continues to use this production philosophy, as far as I can tell. They don't do a whole lot of, they release OSs that are absolutely horrible. Anybody remember? Well, maybe too young to remember Windows Vista. Anybody remember how horrible Windows Vista was? I mean, it was awful. Apple is another example of a company that uses a production philosophy, at least so far as it was when it was operated or run by Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs' attitude was, you don't know what's cool. I am the arbiter of what is cool. And I will tell you what is cool, and you will buy it. And we did. This phone, how many of you have an Apple phone? The majority of you in here have an Apple iPhone. Why? Because Steve told us it was cool and we wanted to have it. In terms of a business device, this is actually not that useful of a device. I remember I was in the private sector at the time that the first Apple iPhone was released, and all of our VPs at the company that I worked for, all of a sudden, we all had BlackBerries. which I called crackberries at the time because we were like addicted to them, like when they came out. In terms of a business device, the crackberry was actually a better device. The BlackBerry was actually a better device. Why is that? It had a full keyboard. Like you could actually touch type on it. You can't do that on this device. This really is a plaything. But everybody in business, even though it's not designed for business, everybody wanted one. Because it was cool, because Steve told us it was cool, and we all wanted it. And now, we all have iPhones. So they still use a production philosophy. The sales philosophy comes about beginning in about the 1920s. And at that point, what you see more people enter the market. And so now it becomes less about just producing it because now we have differentiation in the market. And so now you're actually going to have to go out and sell. Dodge Brothers come along, they enter the market. Other car companies come along and enter the market. All kinds of companies popped up. In fact, when I was in Dallas this last weekend, watching my brother's kids, I came across this old truck. I'll sort of show it to you. It's a Studebaker. You've never even heard of Studebaker. It was one of the car companies that came along and was really, it's kind of a cool old truck. It was a horrible company. Actually, the Studebaker wasn't a very good product, but they entered the market. And the Hudson entered the market. And so now you have to focus on selling, differentiating your product, getting salespeople out there who will sell. Now, this is probably this era or this philosophy is the one that leads to probably the negative attitudes that people have towards salespeople. So I started out my professional career as a political scientist and then a lawyer. And then I went into marketing. So I have been a member of the two most despised professions. And in marketing, my specialty, although it was one that I was reluctant to adopt, is sales. I'm one of the coaches of the professional sales team here at UCO. And a lot of the negative attitudes that we have about salespeople come from this era because it was about high pressure sales. We've got all this product and we need to move it. And so we got to hire people, and it's about getting their interest, awareness, interest, desire, action, the AIDA model, and then moving your product and going on to the next sale. And most of the time was spent in closing, not needs identification. It's about getting some reaction from customers, getting them to buy, and then moving on. And this predominated, and it still predominates, a lot of industries. And it's one of the reasons why when we talk about the sales program, we actually have to sell the program, because a lot of students, they know their parents were smart enough to tell them when they said something, maybe some of you are like this, maybe you said something like, I think I will get a musical theater degree at UCO. And I leaned over to my department chair at the last graduation, and they had all of these wonderful singers that came out, and they sing little inspirational songs at graduation. Our last provost is the one who started this hee-haw, as I call it. But they're singing these wonderful inspirational songs, and they're walking down the aisle and doing this. And I leaned over to my department chair who's sitting next to me, and I said, there's 6 people that won't have a job when they graduate. There's still going to be, would you like fries with that? At the end of this process. And so perhaps some of you are like that. I probably wanted to be a musical theater major, but I'm a tone deaf flat baritone, and so I can't sing or carry a tune. Love to try, love karaoke. If there's a karaoke bar anywhere in the neighborhood, I am all about it. My friends cringe every time I find one. They don't want to go. But that's, something I enjoy, and maybe you're better than I am at it, and you said, I want to be a musical theater major. And your parents said, no, right? You're going to get a business degree because you're going to have to find a job. And so you've been told that a business degree, but what we see is a lot of students say, I want to get a business degree, but I do not want to sell. And the reason they say that is because of this era. It's because of the high pressured sales tactics that were part of this sales philosophy. This grab people's attention, get their interest, get their money, and move on to the next sale. Because we, gotta head them out, had to round them up, head them out, and move them out. That was it. And that's not what we focus on when we talk about sales. And so one of the things we have to do is we have to sell people on this idea. And what we have to say is this is not selling used cars at Britain Motors on a Saturday afternoon. That's not what we're preparing them to do. This is really about business-to-business sales primarily, although we do have some people that go into B2C or business-to-consumer sales. But even there, what we're focusing on is really identifying needs of customers and becoming a partner with them and selecting and building long-term relationships. Car dealers are famous for this attitude, although they are recognizing now that they have to change. This product is no longer as disposable as, when the average price of a car is over $35,000. The average price of a new car, if you look at all of the fleet, it's over $35,000 now. People can't buy a new car every 2 or 3 years. And so what you want to do is you want to focus on building relationships with them. And that includes doing things like, maintenance contracts or free maintenance, free oil changes for the life of the car, things like that. And why is it they want to do that? Well, because then you'll bring the car there when you have other problems. You'll bring it there. It's convenient. They've got you in. They'll say, the tires are now threadbare and you need new tires. I was looking at the tires on my dually the other day, and it's about time that I replace them. That's going to be expensive. It's about $1,200 for a set of tires on a dually. And where am I going to go? Well, I have this relationship with John Vance Motors because, they do my oil changes and they have a powertrain for life guarantee as long as you bought the car from John Vance and you take it there for the oil changes and things like that, and tire rotation. And so it's about developing these relationships, not just getting this quick sale and moving on. Where do we see the sales philosophy permeate? We still see it in a lot of places. One of the things one of the areas where we see it is still in things like furniture sales. How many of you have been to Mathis Brothers? Was that a pleasant experience for you? Yeah, it's in fact, one of the other furniture dealers in town has come up with an his whole motto now. I mean, he's gone through various mottos since I've lived in Oklahoma. When I first moved to Oklahoma, Bob Mills' slogan was the working man's friend, right? And he's given that up, and now he's no shopper. He recognizes that this is not a pleasant experience, and it's not. If you go into Mathis Brothers, it's like they're like vultures, sitting on waiting, and then you try to avoid making eye contact with them.
Try to avoid them too, so they somehow find you.
Yes, they seek you out, and it's just, it's just a horrific experience. You also see this philosophies at one of my favorite fall activities. My favorite thing to do in the fall, I get a season pass every year, is to go to the state fair. And the reason I love the state fair is twofold. A, I used to show horses, and there are lots of horse shows at the state fair. And so I used to go to the state fair when I was in FFA and showed, I showed cattle at that time. But, go to the state fair, it's also, so I love going to the animal shows and the animal barns and watching horse shows and things like that. But I also love the fair for another reason, because as a marketer, it is fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating what people would rather have than their own money. And the state fair is an example. There is every doodad and knick-knack and whatnot available at the fair. And these people are using the sales, they've got these microphones like they're Madonna or Cher. I'm dating myself now, the headset with the microphone. They've got a little sound system, and they're, selling the sham wow or the stainless steel pots that they guarantee will not stick. And by the way, you can every stainless steel pot, the first time you use it, will not stick. After that, it will stick. I can guarantee you that it will stick if you do not use oil or something. But they're selling this stuff, and they get your interest. They're selling Ginsu knives or whatever, and they get your interest. And then what do? Well, in 2 weeks, they've folded up and they've moved on to the next state fair. Right? The state fairs start fairly early in the northern part of the country. And there's a season that these people go through, and it goes all the way to the south. So, like Louisiana's state fair, for example, is in late October, I believe, and it's actually in Shreveport, Louisiana, is where they have their state fair. Why is it so much later than our state fair, which is in September, and our state fair is really late compared to the Iowa State Fair, which is in August. And the Iowa State Fair is known. I've always wanted to go to the Iowa State Fair because it's known for, in an election year, being the place where all the candidates go, right? Because Iowa is the first contest in a presidential election cycle. And so all the candidates go to the Iowa State Fair, and they pitch, they sell, they get on the stump, and they try to sell themselves to the voters in Iowa. So I've always wanted to go to that. But, so these fairs start fairly early, late July and August in the north. And why is that? Well, because state fairs were historically agricultural events, and so you would go to the state fair, the county. If you start out going to the county fair, you got your prize-winning pumpkin, and you win at the county fair, and then you take it to the state fair. And so when it's harvesting, well, it's in August in those northern states, and it's later. So our state fair is in September. The Dallas State Fair, the Texas State Fair in Dallas, is in October. It's always around the time of the Red River rivalry. Because it's always going on at the Cotton Bowl when OU plays Texas, right? And so they're selling this stuff, and they move on to the next thing. And it's not necessarily, for the most part, by and large, on the whole, these are not high dollar products that you're purchasing. I am kind of fascinated by the fact that they sell those chairs that do everything. They lay you back and massage every part of your body. They sell those at the state fair. Have for years. I'm just fascinated by that, because this doesn't seem to me to be a product that really fits the state fair. I'm not thinking I want to buy a $5,000 chair from somebody who's not going to be here, next week when the thing breaks down. But they sell them at the state fair. What else do they sell at the state fair? Well, they sell pools. Now, those are largely local companies that set up displays and sell them at the state fair. But by and large, it's stuff that is, it's toys. It's knickknacks. There's all kinds of stuff. There's the people that bring in the speed art that's made by forced labor in Chinese camps. That's original oils, but they're done on the Bob Ross speed art model by prisoners in China, right? Maybe not the most ethically sourced, but they're selling stuff that's $100 or less for the most part, and it's about getting your interest and getting you to buy it and then moving on. In the 1960s, so that goes from about the 1920s to about the 1960s. Again, there are still examples of this. Go to the state fair, you still see people using the sales philosophy. You'll see a lot of car dealers that still use this philosophy. That people are not loyal. Now, Sewell in Dallas, who's a car dealer, doesn't believe that. He talks about the $500,000 Cadillac customer because that's the average cost that somebody will spend on a Cadillac over their lifetime. That's increased, by the way, since Cadillacs are now, what's a Cadillac Escalade? What's a new Escalade run? It's almost $100,000, right? 90-something odd $1,000. So, and if you factor in what they'll do in telling people about you, it's even more, but a lot of car dealers still use this philosophy. In the 1960s, we get the marketing philosophy. What distinguishes the marketing philosophy? This is a recognition that we can study consumers, and this is where psychology comes into play, from a scientific perspective. That we can really develop a science of marketing and figure out what it is that people need. Rather than just mass producing stuff, again, if we go back to the production philosophy, Henry Ford produces something that's better than the alternative. That's no longer going to be good enough. There's lots of cars out there. They come in all shapes and sizes, and they have different functions. Why is it that I drive a dually? Well, until very recently when I lost my last horse, and I have never just had one horse until recently. I had a 3-horse slant with living quarters in it, and I take my horses on trail rides. We go to New Mexico. You need a large vehicle to tow that, and I have an even bigger boat that I've hauled all over the planet. I have a 36-foot cabin cruiser with dual Volvo Penta motors in it. And I've hauled it all the way to New York to Lake Champlain and all the way back. It was a harrowing experience doing that, pulling that boat, right? But I've done it. So that's why I drive this enormously large, gas guzzling, environmentally not friendly vehicle. Because I need that. I have needs. And those are part of my needs. Why is it that most people drive smaller vehicles? They don't want to pay the gas that vehicle consumes, right? It's also not exactly a smooth ride. Why do people buy minivans? By the way, when you buy a minivan, that's the sign you've given up, right? You've given in. But if you have kids, this is a great thing. My brother has resisted. He's got 2 kids, and he has resisted, not bought a minivan. But it would be very convenient. 2 kids. My nephew plays lacrosse, and my niece plays soccer and gymnastics. And they've got all of this stuff. And minivans are great if you're doing all this stuff because you can put a whole lot of stuff in them. And a lot of times we have 2 or 3 events in a day, and you're having to change clothes. My niece had a gymnastics tournament on Saturday that I had to take her to, and then in the afternoon she had a soccer game. We didn't have time. My nephew had a lacrosse game in between there. We didn't have time to run them back to the house, so that if we'd had a minivan, they could have been changing in the back. That's great. So there's minivans for people who have the soccer moms out there who have all of these activities for their children. So we can study the consumer and see what it is that they want, what it is that they like. And we can do this with really a lot of scientific precision. And so that's what the marketing philosophy recognizes, is that we can make the consumer a part of the research process. Rather than just putting things out there, you can do this. You can get away with putting out crappy OSs if you're Microsoft, and there is a very limited number of people in the field. That's not true in the car field. That's not true in most things. In most other markets, there are multiple sellers and we have choices. We're not forced to deal with just 1 or 2 or a handful of providers. And so we can really study the consumer and figure out what it is that they want. Beginning in the late 1980s, In the 1990s, the philosophy changes. It's no longer now just enough to study the consumer, and we get the what's called the relationship philosophy in marketing. This recognition that there are values. There's a customer lifetime value. If you build a relationship, Sewell recognizes this in the auto deal. People are loyal to Cadillac. They like his service, and they return and they buy over and over again. So it's about building these relationships. How does this relate to those other philosophies in virtue ethics, what we talked about, for example, with Aristotle? If we'd read Aristotle before, we could have skipped a lot of these and gone right to this, because Aristotle talks about friendship, as you'll recall, right? There's friendship grounded in utility, there's friendship grounded in pleasure, and then there's perfected friendship. Well, that's what we're doing. We're building friendships grounded in utility. Nothing wrong with that, but recognize that when the utility's over, the friendship is probably going to be over. But this is useful. So we can engage in this value co-creation, where we're now not just studying the consumer and not just listening to the consumer and giving them what they want, but actually engaging with them. Some examples of this value co-creation are Dell, for example. Forever and ever, you would buy a Dell by going online or calling, and they would mass customize the Dell to your needs. Now, M&M's does this. When I was a kid growing up, M&M's were the same. They changed slightly at one point, actually. When I was a young child, they had red M&M's, and then they figured out that something in the red dye was toxic and caused cancer. And so they pulled the red M&Ms out, and there were no red M&Ms. Then they came out with, I remember it was a big deal. They came out with a safer dye, and they reintroduced the red M&M. And so that was a huge thing. But forever and ever, M&Ms were basically these candy-coated chocolate candies, and their slogan was, melts in your mouth, not in your hands. That was M&M's big deal. And I can tell you, if you have sweaty little hands like I do, they will melt in your hand. I've tried this. If you have sweaty little palms like mine, they will actually melt. But they came in a 5-ounce, I think it was 5-ounce package, and that cellophane package that was brown that said M&M's, and that was it. Now they're engaging in mass customization. So you can do all kinds of things. You no longer just have to have the M&Ms in a 5-ounce cellophane package. You can get them in gift jars or in clear packages, in little personalized candy bags, in tins. You can get them for your wedding and put your creepy little photo on the M&M and put your vapid saying on there. Cindy and Mike forever. Ah, sweet, right? And you can do all of these different things. Why is that? Well, what is the value that's added here? Well, if you are a fan of M&Ms, it allows you to personalize this experience for your special day or for your business to give out as gifts to remind people. At Christmas time, my secretaries, when I was in the private sector, used to love that one of the vendors that we used for office supplies brought all kinds of candy, and they brought M&Ms in with their logos on them and all kinds of things. And so it's about this now engaging in a long-term relationship and creating value together. How are we creating value together with things like My M&Ms? Well, the customer is interacting with the company through their website to get what they want. That's personalized and unique to them. And so it's this building on these relationships and allowing for, it's not just a 5-ounce cellophane package with 4 or 5 colors, but now we have all of these different options that you can select. And we can do that as a result of really a massive amount of scientific production capability in terms of logistics and other things that we can now do that allow for the mass customization of products. Any questions about marketing theories? All right, so we need to talk about corporate social responsibility. I thought I turned all of that off. There we go. So, corporate social responsibility and marketing ethics. How do we do this? Well, we're going to use the theories that we've talked about, and we're going to focus on becoming good corporate citizens. When Mitt Romney was running for president, he said something and people really made fun of him, but it was true. I guess somebody who would probably be identified as a Bernie Sanders fan was in the crowd and started talking about, you know, the evils of corporate greed. And Mitt Romney said, "Corporations are people, my friends." And everybody laughed. That's true. Corporations are legal people. What does that mean? They are legal persons. What does that mean? That they're legal persons, that they are legal people.
They have rights.
They have rights. That's exactly what it means. And those rights are identified by the United States Supreme Court in things like Citizens United, which everybody thinks is a horrible, or most people think is a horrible decision. What does Citizens United say? Well, it says that corporations have First Amendment rights. They have the right to engage in campaign financing and freedom of speech. They can put out ads. And you had better believe that if Bernie Sanders is the nominee for the Democrat Party, they're going to put out a lot of ads that target him. Because what does Bernie Sanders want to do? Well, he wants to raise and eliminate loopholes on corporations. There are lots of corporations out there who pay nothing. They are legal people. And so as legal people, they're supposed to pay taxes, just like you and I. But because they have teams, and my brother is one of them. My brother is a tax attorney for Goldman Sachs. Now, he does taxes for wealthy individuals. In order to be my brother's client, you have to be worth $50 million. That's the floor. That's his poorest client. It's worth $50 million. And he doesn't have any clients that are that poor, as he puts it, that are only worth $50 million. Yeah.
Where does he live at?
He lived in New York for a long time, but there was a Goldman vice president who was from New York, and they had put him in the Dallas office, and he hated it. He didn't like the weather in Dallas. Dallas is like Oklahoma. It's hot.
It's like Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean it's not that different. He absolutely hated it. And so when my brother got a divorce and wanted to move closer to family so that we could do things like I can run down and take his kids to soccer when he can't be there and stuff like that. So he traded. So he moved, the guy that was from New York, moved back up to New York, and my brother came and took over the Dallas office for a division of Goldman that he works for called ACO. So, but a lot of his clients have businesses. They have corporations. And these corporations, in theory, should pay taxes, and most of them don't, right? Because they have people like my brother who figure out creative ways. The tax code and all of the regulations which interpret the code, if you stacked it on end to end, it would exceed the height of the ceiling in this room. It's something like the code itself, not all of the regulations that interpret the code, is something like 75,000 pages long. It's enormously complex. Why do they have all of this? Well, because special interests like corporations have all kinds of lobbyists that go to Washington and say things like, well, we need, a special subsidy for oil and natural gas. That's one that's popular here in Oklahoma. They have mounds of lobbyists that go, and so they say things like, well, we can't tax oil, we can't have a huge production tax. Or they fight the gasoline tax, right? On all these things. So Mitt Romney makes the statement when he was running against Barack Obama, corporations are people, my friends, and they are. Politicians get into trouble when they tell the truth. And so he was telling the truth. Corporations are people. They're legal people. And they have rights. Now, obviously, they can't actually go out and vote. The corporation can't register, but they can do almost everything else that a legal person can do. They can engage in political speech, which forever and ever and ever we thought they shouldn't do. We thought that was, and then the United States Supreme Court said, oh, no. They have free speech rights just like everybody else. What else have corporations gotten as a result of the fact that they are legal people in this country that they don't have in other places? Well, another example is the Supreme Court, as a result of this freedom of speech thing, pharmaceutical companies can advertise, direct consumer advertising of drugs, prescription medication. That's not permissible in other countries. There's only one other country that allows direct consumer advertising of pharmaceutical drugs. That country is New Zealand. The United States and New Zealand are the only ones. You cannot advertise drugs in Germany. Now, there are good things and bad things about this, right? Advertising of drugs. What are some of the good things, I think, that have come about as a result of pharmaceutical companies being able to advertise their drugs to consumers?
Increase awareness.
Absolutely, yeah. Of things that we used to not talk about. My father was an FBI agent. He was a special agent in charge of the field office in Santa Fe, New Mexico for the FBI. When he was hired under J. Edgar Hoover, who was the founding director of the FBI, and Hoover had to meet everybody personally. And there were things that, if you had ever been, you could not be an FBI agent. If you had ever, now the FBI would put you through a psychiatric exam, but if you had ever seen a psychiatrist or psychologist outside of that experience, that was at one time an a priori bar to employment with the FBI. The idea was, if you saw a psychiatrist or a psychologist, you're what? You're cuckoo, and we're not going to hire you. We're not going to give you the gun. Can't do it. Well, as a result of direct consumer advertising of pharmaceutical drugs, we now recognize that people oftentimes, through no fault of their own, and they're not crazy, right? That there are chemical reactions that occur in the brain that you can control things, and people shouldn't suffer. So we now talk about mental issues in a way that we wouldn't have even 20 years ago. When I started teaching, people didn't talk about things like that. Now everybody everyone I know is on Paxil or Zoloft or something. I'm one of the few people I know that doesn't take anything. Maybe I should. I might be a more pleasant person. But I rather like my curmudgeonly, solipsistic attitude. I relish it. But most people, everyone I know is on some form of happy drug, right? When my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, the first thing the oncologist did was say, we want to put you on an antidepressant because this is not going to be a pleasant experience, and this will help you cope with that. She did, took it. It has helped. And having a positive attitude when you're going through cancer is a big part of the battle. People who think that they're going to get well do better. And so, they do these things. Now, what's the bad part about this? Well, as a result of the direct-to-consumer advertising, I think what we have is we have an attitude in this country. There is a bad part. There's a good part, which is we now recognize that these things are not something that we should be ashamed of, that we should talk about them, that normal human beings experience this. What's the bad part? I think the bad part is that we have a tendency as a result of this to believe that everything can be cured with a pill. When I was in my 20s, I could eat everything in sight and drink beer and not gain weight. Until I hit 42 or 43, I weighed between 159 and 165 consistently. I no longer weigh that, right? It's as a result of the fact that I still like to drink a lot of beer and eat stuff that I probably shouldn't eat. And I like to cook, and I like to eat. And probably, there are all of these advertisements for the little purple pill. Probably people ought to recognize that once you get out of your 20s, and even some of us in our 20s, it wasn't me, but other people I knew, if you ate the extra long supersonic coney with chili cheese and Fritos on top or whatever it is, that you're probably not going to feel real great, right? But there's a belief that, we'll just take the pill and everything will be okay. Just take the pill and you can then eat whatever. Probably not feeling real great is your body's way of saying, don't do that, right? Like shouldn't do that. So I think there's a bad part, which is that we have a tendency to just run to the doctor and self-prescribe. And as a result of the fact that the medical profession can no longer spend a lot of time with you if they want to make money, if they want to maximize their profits, they don't do a holistic thing. Yeah, okay, you're depressed here. Let me give you the script, right? Doctors, if they want to make money, can spend 5 minutes or less with you. How much time does it take to really diagnose a whole person? So I used to be the associate general counsel for the university. And when I left UCO to go get my PhD, a lot of my colleagues took me out for lunch. And one of our marketing professors at the time, who was also the associate dean, said, well, you're going to go get a real doctor's degree, because the Juris Doctor is the doctor's degree, but people with a PhD don't recognize that. And so he said, you're going to go get a real doctor's degree. I said, oh God, here we go. We're starting with the academic snobbery already, right? Everybody knows that the MD is better than the DO, right? If you can't hack it in medical school, what do? You go get the DO. That's Doctor of Osteopathy. Basically, it's almost the same program as the medical school degree. but it's easier to get into osteopathy school, right? So there's this whole pecking order, and on a college campus, the pecking order is PhD. The PhD is superior to the EDD, it's superior to the JD. And I said, if you really want to get down to it, veterinarian school should be the pinnacle. It's harder to get into vet school than it is to get into med school. Do you know that? It's tougher. The entrance exams and the qualifications for vets are tougher. Why is that? Well, not every state has a vet school. Every state has at least one medical school, and most have more. In Oklahoma, if you want to go to medical school, you can go to osteopathy school at OSU in Tulsa, or you can get an MD at OU, right? And lots of states have more than that. And this guy who said this, his name was John Caney, he was our associate dean, he said, that's right. And he said, and I think medical doctors should have to go to do a rotation with a vet. He said, I go into my vet, and the vet knows my name, my wife's name, my kid's name, and my dog's name. He said, I went into my doctor after having surgery, and he walks in and says, have I ever seen you before? And he said, yes, last week. You did surgery, and he's like, oh, medicine has become such that if they want to make money, they have 5 minutes with you. And you can't possibly, so what happens, and the reason I tell you this story is that what has happened is that people start self-diagnosing. And as long as it's reasonable, the doc is going to write the script for you. Now, if you go in and say, I stubbed my toe and I want Oxycontin, they're not going to do that anymore. They used to, but we've now come to an awareness that they shouldn't. But within reason, if you go in and say, my dog died and I'm so depressed, I need Zoloft, they're going to give it to you. And maybe they should take more than 5 minutes and say things like, when your dog dies, that's a normal human emotion. And maybe we shouldn't put you on Zoloft for that. Or do you have other problems? But if your dog dies, and I can tell you this is somebody who has had lots of animals, it's not going to be a happy day for you if you're a normal human being. Because dogs are one of the things that make life wonderful. As you all go to sleep and nod off and are not paying attention to me, I go home. I don't actually have a dog anymore. We lost our last dog. So I'm just a sob story today, right? But I go home and my dogs were all happy to see me. And I was the only thing that mattered. The minute you walk in, and it doesn't matter if you're gone for 30 seconds or 3 hours, you get the same reaction from them. You may not, you may, that's a normal human emotion. If you lose a dog, maybe you don't need Zoloft. So corporate social responsibility, what does all of this mean since we have all of this freedom? Corporations are real people. They're legal people. Well, one of the big case studies in this area of corporate social responsibility is Walmart. At one time, Walmart was the largest private employer in the United States. I'm not sure that that's still true. I think Amazon may have surpassed Walmart, but I'd have to look. And Amazon, by the way, is a horrible place to work. I think I've told you this. Because they do a forced distribution, and some people are, if you're at the bottom 10%, they automatically fire you, which means that people in their distribution centers, their documented cases, they're going pee in Coke bottles because they don't want to get fired, right? And that's not a friendly place to work. Walmart, in many respects, is about the same. I think to this day this is true. They are still the largest retailer of socks, toothpaste, guns, textiles, that's like clothing, and you wouldn't guess it, but it's true, diamonds. Now they've cut way back, and it used to be that Walmart was the largest retailer of diamonds, but they were all what I refer to as can-hardlies. And what do I mean by can hardly? Somebody would show you their diamond wedding band from Walmart and you can hardly see it, right? That's not true anymore. You can go to Sam's and you can order a $75,000 stone, 3 carats, VVSI, H color. I mean, this is remarkable. Walmart reversed the power in the distribution chain. And one of the things that I used to pull up, but I can't anymore because it's no longer true. What do I mean by they reversed the power in the distribution chain? Historically, who had all of the power in the distribution chain? It was the manufacturer of the good. Because the manufacturer of the good set the initial price. You see this all the time. When you go to the car lot, for example, there will be on the sticker of the car that you're going to buy, if it's a new car, the MSRP, which stands for what? What does MSRP stand for? On the sticker.
I guess you use it for manufacturing.
Manufacturing
Something for it.
suggested retail price, right? That's going to be on the sticker. And then what the car dealer is going to do is they're going to list all of the things that they've added, like that they claim adds value, which maybe it does or maybe it doesn't. Things like the transportation cost, obviously, the transportation cost to Oklahoma. If you're buying your car, if it's manufactured in Detroit and it's going to a Detroit dealership, obviously the transportation cost is going to be less than the logistics cost to someplace like Oklahoma. And then you'll get through all of it and you'll notice at the bottom there's something called dealer prep. And you're paying for that. Now, what is dealer prep? It's them putting all of that crap on there that you could care less about, like the sticker that says John Vance Motors and the license plate holder that says they're charging you for that. In essence, they're charging you to advertise for them, right? Historically, the manufacturer set the price, and in the auto industry they still do. That MSRP is a powerful thing in that it determines what they're asking for the product, and then all of the middlemen have to add value in that supply chain in order to come at the final price. Well, Walmart, because they were so large, because they were the largest retailer of socks and toothpaste and guns and textiles. This may have changed as a result of Amazon, by the way. And I'm still looking at whether or not that's true. But they totally changed because Walmart said, look, if you want to sell to Walmart, you're going to have an office in Bentonville, Arkansas. If you've ever been to Bentonville, it's a hole in the road, right? I mean, there's not much there except for Walmart and Tyson and JB Hunt Trucking. And you're going to have to come to us, and we're going to tell you what we will pay for it. We're going to tell you what your profit will be. And by and large, all of these manufacturers, there was one case of a man who said no to Walmart. It was Snapper Mowers, and I used to pull up the article, the man who said no to Walmart. Walmart basically said, we want to sell your mowers, but we sell mowers. What is it that people want from a Walmart mower? What do you think they want to pay if they go to Walmart for their mower?
$50 to $100.
They want to pay $100. That's it, right? That's what the average Walmart customer was willing to. They said, we want to sell, and Snapper said, we don't sell mowers for $100, right? Because that's not who we are. People like buy they associate Snapper with quality, and now they're selling them at Walmart. So the man who said no to Walmart ultimately said yes to Walmart. Now they sell they sell more than $100 mower, I think. They came to an understanding, but they now sell to Walmart. But Walmart basically did their market research, and they found out that their customer wanted to pay about $100 for a mower, And what are they willing to get for that? I mean, the average customer who buys a Walmart mower, they will use it 1, maybe 2 seasons, and they recognize that it's probably on the 3rd season, it's not going to start. You're going to have lots of problems, and you'll just throw it away. It's disposable. That's not what Snapper wanted. That's not what their brand image was, and they didn't want that to be their brand image. But they are now have come to heel, and they're selling at Walmart. How does Walmart also get to this? Well, I put up here, they use labor practices that reduce costs but are ethically suspect. This could be true of Amazon as well, right? Because when you're telling people you can't go to the bathroom, that seems to be pretty violative of fundamental human dignity. Now, of course, Jeff Bezos would say, I'm not telling people that. It just so happens that that's what they're having to do. You know, that those people are morally weak. Perhaps they should train their bladder. You know, hold it. You can get used to the discomfort. Or better yet, follow the Queen's rule. What's the Queen's rule? Well, whenever Her Majesty has an event, something like for 4 to 6 hours before the event, she doesn't eat or drink anything. Do that. Now, that's pretty remarkable for someone who's what? I think she's almost 90 years old now. Most people no. You're going to pass out if you do that. Walmart did similar things as well. They became a company that Sam Walton wouldn't recognize. One of the things that Sam Walton did when he ran the company was he was the first one to call employees associates rather than employees or workers. He called them associates, and they actually had programs where if you worked with Walmart, you got stock grants as part of your compensation. So you owned a piece of the company. And to this day, they still pay homage to that, in that if you go into a Walmart or Sam's store, somewhere in the building, usually at the back in Walmart and Sam's, it's right up front because that's where they hold the employee meetings, the little rah sessions that they have, is today's stock price. And under it, it'll say today's stock price, tomorrow is dependent on you. And the idea is that, if you own part of the company, if you're getting stock, that you'll be interested in creating good customer service and value, and that's what Sam Walton wanted. They stopped doing that really a long time ago. I remember at one point in time, there was a woman I knew. She started at the Guthrie Walmart when the Guthrie Walmart opened. And she was really unique in that Walmart used to do this as well. They don't do this anymore. She started out, had a high school education, that's it. Started out working for Walmart when she was, I think, in high school at 16. She went through DECA in high school, which is the Distributive Education Clubs of America, which is the marketing club in high schools. And it's the counterpart to the AMA club that we have here, for example, at the high school level. So she got off 6th hour to go to work at Walmart, and she actually worked her way up. You could do this at that time. You can't do it anymore. She worked her way up to being store manager of the Guthrie Walmart. And when she retired, because of the stock grants that they had given her, she retired with over $1 million in profit share in her account. And at that point in time, if you had $1 million, this was in the late 1980s and early 1990s. At that point in time, if you had $1 million, that was, people thought you were pretty well set for life. And she was. She paid off her home, and she sort of lived the American dream, retired from Walmart with over $1 million of profit sharing. That's not what Walmart does today. Most of their employees are part-time. Why did they do that? So that they didn't have to provide health care insurance. Once Sam died, they started cutting the number of full-time employees because they didn't want to give out those rich benefits. The cheapest way to do that is to not give people health care. Have everybody start out as a part-time employee. That way you don't have to give them any benefits. Under the Affordable Care Act, that changed. I am out of time, so we'll finish talking about corporate social responsibility next time. And how to engage in corporate social responsibility, how to use the ethical theories that we've learned to apply it to corporate social responsibility. And then we will move on from there. I will see you all on Thursday. If you did the test and you noticed that you probably got a score in the grade book, obviously, and I figure I shouldn't have to say this, but people freak out in my online class, and I put on there, I have not graded the essay, right? Like I put an announcement out, like the essay is not something that's automatically graded. I'm moving offices. It takes me time to do this. I can't just, do it in, 5 minutes. So obviously the essay is not been graded. All right.